It all starts tomorrow, or it all ends tomorrow. Southern Columbia, our only team in the NEPA region left, made it to the state finals in Cumberland Valley as they take on a familiar foe in Farrell, who have they seen before, I believe both in 1995 and 96, but Farrell won both of those matchups, ironically, against Jim Roth. So Jim Roth probably, he wants a little get back with this game coming up, and he wants to win another state title, as the team didn't even make it to the state playoffs last year, losing to Troy in their district championship game. But yeah, this is all the makings of being a pretty good game. Both of these teams really strong teams. I think Farrell only has one loss. They're among the highest ranked teams in the state. And then of course you have the Southern Columbia, the Tigers, come in, and I think they have only one loss as well. They have been they played a very tough out-of-conference schedule. They've played a lot of tough games this year, including that district title game against against Troy, in which they did win by a decent margin. But Troy was a really good team, and to be honest with you, I don't think any of us were expecting what happened to happen in that game. But this is a team in Farrell that is going to come out. They're going to try and put points on the board. They're from District 10, so obviously out of our area. But they took down a really good, or Southern Columbia took down a really good Lansdale Catholic team last week, as they went out and beat them 24-7. Controlled a majority of that game. Really frustrated Lansdale Catholic, as Southern Columbia, I think, showed why they are such a good program year in and year out. They go out there, and they play some hard-nosed football. They run the ball a lot. They're not a big passing team, but they've got some young guys on the field. They got a good senior class on the field. They've got just a wide variety of talent all over the football field. If you're fair coming into this game. But Southern Columbia, I think they have the most appearances. This is going to be I believe their 23rd or 24th appearance in the state final game. I think they have the most state title appearances in both in all of PA in multiple districts. I think they have 15 or 16 in District 2 or 8 in District 1. So this is a team that can go out, and they've proven that they could win in multiple districts. But this year's Southern Columbia, they lost their opener, but they bounced back with 14th consecutive win. A 15th in a row would result in another championship, as you all can imagine, as this has just been a storied program. But they faced that familiar opponent. These two have faced off in single A in both 1995 and 96, and both games were close, but Southern lost that game by a combined 8 points. So you can imagine, again, Jim Roth is going to want to get his lick back in this game. This game probably, if you ask him, he's probably going to say it's a normal state title game. But in all reality, he probably still remembers those 95 and 96 single A state playoff losses, and I'm sure he wants to get revenge against those Farrell Steelers. But the 95 team, in which the Tigers lost 6-0, current Farrell coach Anthony Pague was the QB for that team. So a little bit of storied history there as well, with Farrell having that championship resume, having that championship pedigree on their roster or on their coaching staff. With the last time they beat this Southern Columbia team. But Jim Roth was asked, he was joked a little bit, but said he guessed it means he's getting old. This is a full circle type of game from early in his career up until now, and I'm sure he wants to get a little bit of revenge going in this game. But Pague's son, Andrew, is now the QB, and he will be a real challenge, as the Southern Columbia defense has really played its best ball early. I think this is a group that really struggled early on in the year, but they have gotten progressively better as the year went on, and it's not always how you start the year, it's how you end the year in football. And practically all sports, you want to end the year strong, and that is just what Southern Columbia has done. They've ended the year playing their best football, particularly on the defensive side. Southern has held their opponents on average to 27 points below their season average when they've played. And Southern's offense also has averaged just under 41 points a game as well. But if you look at some key players from both teams coming into this game with Southern, it's got to start with Braden Andrews. He saved his best season for his last one. He has 1,500 yards, almost 9 yards a carry, and 21 TDs on the ground. He's really been the focal point of this offense. A lot of their offense has ran through him. They're a very run-heavy offense. They go downhill, and they will attack right up front. They will attack your defensive line, and they will tire you out. Offensive lineman Jalen Carter is one of the biggest reasons why. He is the biggest lineman that Southern has, and he's shown his potential. And another dominant performance to cap off his year would really, I think, mean a lot to this Southern program, and it would go a long way to getting this team towards a victory. And on the defensive line, the leader on the team in sacks, it's got to be Chase Williams. Once again, he's going to provide heavy pressure against this Farrell QB, and they're really going to try and get after this Farrell defense that has been pretty stout as well. But and lastly, at tight end for the Southern Columbia offense, it's Jace Malakowski, the junior. He's probably one of the best receiving tight ends in the area that we've seen, and he's going to see time on the defensive line as well. They don't pass the ball often, but when they do, they're going to look for their man in the middle, their tight end, Jace Malakowski, and he's going to be a big part of this Southern defensive line. And then, of course, you have Caden Zachman on the defensive backfield for Southern as well. He's the safety for Southern Columbia. He's the middle of the secondary. He leads the team with 5 interceptions. He really is a guy you need to look out for in that secondary. He's been a ball hawk for them all year. And with the Steelers coming into town, you got to watch out for them. But yeah, I mean, the keys to winning this game, if you're Aiden Hockenbrock, their QB, he's been pretty efficient through the air this year. He hasn't thrown an interception since August when he tossed 3 in the season opening loss. So a big reason why this Southern offense has been better, a big reason why this Southern team has been better is because of Hockenbrock. Is because of his arm. It's because of his inability to throw interceptions, and he's got some running ability as well. The Tigers need to continue to execute with that run game. They need to continue to run it down the Steelers team's throat. That's what they've got to do to win this game. That's how they've won games all year. They're going to get a heavy dose of Braden Andrews, and they're going to get a heavy dose of Aiden Hockenbrock as well. But negative plays all should be crucial. Penalty issues have also been an issue for Southern Columbia as well. But moving the chains, taking up time like they have all year should prove successful for the Southern Columbia offense. Defensively, you can't allow anyone behind you in the secondary. The Steelers are able to run the ball. If the Steelers are able to run the ball, good for them. This is a pass-first offense, though. This is a team that wants to move the ball down the field. I think their QB has 21 TDs through the air. They're a team that wants to move the ball through the air. They're a talented team, and there's been a little bit of back and forth on social media between these two teams as well. You know, on Facebook, both saying they haven't seen teams like the other going into this game. Well, only one of those will prove true come the end of this game, and that's going to be the winner of this game. It's going to be a really good game. I expect it to be decently high scoring, but I think the big thing is going to be turnovers. Can the Steelers get some turnovers? Can Southern Columbia force turnovers? These are two really good QBs, but these are two opposite play styles going up against each other. If you're the Farrell Steelers, you're probably going to stack the box. You're probably going to make Southern look for their tight ends and wide receivers a little bit more than maybe they're normally used to. But if you're Southern Columbia, you're going to lighten the box a little bit. You're going to have your defensive backs. You're going to have Caden Zachman going back there, trying to create some splash plays on the defensive side of the ball. But this is a team that's going to want – this is a Southern team that's going to want to force the Steelers to pass the ball. Not the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Farrell Steelers. They're going to want them to pass the ball because you're going to want them to run the ball. That's what you're going to want the Farrell Steelers to ultimately do. You're going to want them to run the ball. You're going to want to make them prove to you that, hey, we've got a suitable run game. Because Farrell all year, they've been a pass-heavy team. They've had success on the ground, but certainly not as much as they've had through the air. But, you know, if you're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, you want them to pass the ball. You don't want them to run the ball, but it's pretty opposite here with the Farrell Steelers. But if you're Southern, yeah, you don't want any deep passes. You don't want them to be able to move the ball through the air. The run defense will also, again, I think have their toughest challenge since the season opener, as Farrell's running back, Jules Johnson, is looking to break his single season rushing record, and defensive coordinator Andy Mills, he wants his defense playing like they have been all year. They need to clean up some things in the first half when they played Lansdale. I think they were only up 14-7 at the half, but they ended up pulling away and shutting out Lansdale Catholic in the second half. But this is going to be a good game. I'm excited to see both of these teams go at each other. This should be, again, a pretty close game. I can't see one team or the other blowing them out. Southern Columbia and Farrell both have that state playoff pedigree. They're both really talented squads, and we'll see if for the second year in a row, another PIAA, NEPA team could take home this AA state championship. But we'll see on Friday. Kickoff is at 1 at Cumberland Valley High School. Nick will have all the latest for you tomorrow in that game when it starts at 1 p.m. But we'll see what happens. But now we're going to take a little bit of a break, because now we're going to transition into the Pittsburgh Steelers, who will be facing off against the Baltimore Ravens. And what are the Pittsburgh Steelers? Did they even want to win this game? Well, the ultimate goal is to probably win this game, because the division is still in hand. So we'll see what happens. But what will Mike Tomlin's squad have to do to rebound from a thumping last week against Josh Allen's Bills, and going up against a Ravens squad that has their own injury concerns, with Lamar Jackson missing practice today? So we'll get to that right after the break. Hello, everyone, and we're back here on 2822 Sports Night. I'm your host, Ricky Turner, and we're sponsored by Hyundai. But now we'll be moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to be traveling into Baltimore, into hostile territory, and really what doesn't feel like a normal Steelers-Ravens rivalry game. Both of these teams, I think both fan bases can agree, they're not going far in the playoffs. Both of these teams just don't have what it takes to go far. They aren't looking like playoff contenders right now. Baltimore's dealing with injuries to Lamar Jackson. The Steelers just don't look like a playoff team. The Steelers aren't playing like a playoff team. The Baltimore run offense hasn't been as good. The Baltimore offensive line has struggled. Pittsburgh's passing game has really struggled. The run game has been inconsistent. Aaron Rodgers is dealing with the wrist injury. He can't be under center, and that is typically where Pittsburgh does most of its damage on the ground, and there's just a plethora of issues on the defensive side of the ball. They got gashed last week to the tune of 289 yards on 51 carries against the Buffalo Bills run offense. Yeah, that's probably the big one defensively. They can't stop the run, and they're going to be without their top run stuffer and Derek Harmon this week. So they're going to be dealing with a lot of the same issues. There's been some controversy. Does Mike Tomlin deserve to be fired? Is this going to be Harbaugh's last year in Baltimore? Both of these teams, I think, would actually, they wouldn't mind a loss in this game because of the fact they're dealing with the plethora of issues that they've both been dealing with for the past couple of years. These teams have been good enough. Baltimore may be a little bit better at it than Pittsburgh. They've been good enough to win in the regular season. Baltimore, and in the case of Baltimore, they've been able to get one playoff win, and then they struggle to beat the Bills or Chiefs. With Pittsburgh, they're good enough to win in the regular season, win 9 or 10 games, get a wild card, maybe a division spot. If you're, in this case, 9 or 10 wins would probably be good enough to get a division championship, but they haven't been able to win in the postseason. So both teams' fan bases, I think, are hoping for a change in the offseason, some kind of change, some type of furniture moving to get these both teams moving in the right direction. And I'm a part of that. I think Pittsburgh needs to find a way to move on from Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin has done his course. I think we've seen the best out of Mike Tomlin, and I think the team needs to hear a new voice, despite the national media pounding the table saying that Mike Tomlin will be hired as 2 minutes after you fire him. Yes, he will be, because a team like the Giants needs a head coach. Will Penn State offer Mike Tomlin a job? We've already seen how that has transpired in the past when Mike Tomlin has been linked to college jobs. He says, and I quote, "Never say never, but never," because he feels he has one of the best jobs in sports. And maybe he feels he has one of the best, 32 jobs in sports, as Nick and I were talking about yesterday. There's one of 32 NFL coaches. With college, you're one of, you're still one of a select group, but you're one of 300, a little bit more than that in Division I, despite Penn State being such a storied program. But we'll see what happens. Both of these teams desperately need wins. Pittsburgh is dealing with a lot of injuries up front. As I mentioned, Derek Harmon's hurt. Aaron Rodgers returned to practice as well. They let go of Darius Slay, who was claimed by the Bills, but now Darius Slay doesn't want to play for the Bills. He's not sure if that's where he wants to be. I think he wants to force his way back to Philadelphia in hopes that they will sign him. But they're, as we're going to get to later in our episode, they're going through their own issues as well. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've got a lot to think about right now. They signed Adam Thielen, 35 or 37-year-old Adam Thielen, to a wide receiver room, a veteran wide receiver, maybe to try and please Aaron Rodgers. Because Aaron, if you remember after the game last week, was talking about how guys have to recognize when he's changing up plays, when he's doing hand signals to change up plays. And he did that last week, and the most notable play was Jonnu Smith was supposed to run an in-breaking route instead of an out-breaking route. Aaron audible to a different version of the play. I guess Jonnu Smith didn't see the play. To be honest with you, Jonnu Smith's been a bust. I don't know why Pat Freiermuth isn't in the game. Aaron Rodgers has also been clamoring for that. He says he doesn't get paid enough to discuss why Pat Freiermuth isn't played enough. It's reportedly because I guess Arthur Smith just prefers Jonnu Smith. He prefers what he can do in the offense, and he doesn't trust Pat Freiermuth as much, which I find a little hard to believe. I think Pat Freiermuth is some of the more consistent hands on the team. Good things have happened when you've gotten him the ball. Also, you signed him to a 4-year, $48 million contract. I don't think you paid him that to sit on the bench and get 7 targets in the last 4 games, because that's over, I don't know, that's actually just under $7 million a target. Is that what you're paying Pat Freiermuth to do? I'd hope not, because he's probably one of your more valuable weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and was supposed to be a big part of this offense. The tight end room as a whole was supposed to be a big part of this offense. But Jonnu Smith, that is seemingly busted. I can't see him being a big part of this offense for the remainder of the year or even into next year, as the team will probably look to move on from him. Darnell Washington has probably been their best tight end, and he probably fits the scheme best, if I'm being honest with you. He's big, he can block, he's mobile, he's athletic, he can create mismatches in space. But Pat Freiermuth, in terms of a receiving tight end and getting where you need him to be at a certain time, is probably your best option at this point, because Darnell Washington is very big, but it doesn't mean he can move very well. That's why he's called Mount Washington. Mountains aren't typically made to be moved. Mountains typically move people, and they don't get to where they're supposed to be very quickly. But again, no disrespect to Darnell. I love Darnell. I think he's been one of the better stories for this team this year, and I've liked the way they've used him. Wish they've used him a little bit more, but I'd like to see Pat Freiermuth at some point get in there. But going into this game, Pittsburgh's going to need to stop the run. They're going to need to stop Derrick Henry. Lamar Jackson, if he's healthy, I think he's dealing with an ankle injury. You got to stop Derrick Henry. That's the guy who gashed you last year. Now, this Ravens run offense hasn't been as good last year. That has been why I think their offense as a whole has struggled recently. Their passing offense has been a little off, and Lamar Jackson has been dealing with a lot of lower body extremity injuries since coming back from that hamstring injury. People are wondering if he came back too fast from that, but that remains to be seen, but he's been on the injury report, I think, every single week since he's been activated. So we'll see what happens, and that's why the Cincinnati Bengals still have a chance to win this division, because in all honesty, they might have the best shot just because of the fact they have Joe Burrow, they have a lightning-fast offense, and they can outscore almost any offense in the NFL. They just need their defense to get 1 or 2 stops a game, and the way they played last week against Baltimore, they stopped them a lot. But luckily, Pittsburgh doesn't have to play them again. Baltimore, I think, has to play them again next week, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Pittsburgh's got to stop Derrick Henry, and they didn't stop James Cook last week. Now, Derrick Henry, as I mentioned, hasn't been the Derrick Henry we saw last year. But we'll see what happens with that. But Pittsburgh, you gotta stop Derrick Henry. You got to get to Lamar Jackson. You got to create turnovers. That's always a big one. And offensively, you really got to run the ball well. This has been a pretty stout Ravens run defense. Their secondary has dealt with some issues at times. They've also dealt with some injuries as well. So Pittsburgh hopefully can exploit that. But Pittsburgh is a run-first offense. Maybe they get Adam Thielen involved, but Pittsburgh needs to run the ball. Pittsburgh also needs to protect Aaron Rodgers, which their offensive line, I think, is rated as the third best pass blocking offensive line in the NFL. And Broderick Jones, who they're missing, has had a pretty solid year as well. He's the only lineman, I think, non-penalized with a certain amount of snaps through week 13. But unfortunately, he got hurt a couple weeks ago, and he's out for the rest of the season with the stinger. So Pittsburgh will have to make a decision on him come off-season time. But you got to protect Aaron Rodgers. You got to run the football with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. You got to find a way to attack the middle of the field. Roquan Smith has struggled in coverage this year, and they don't really have another suitable coverage linebacker in there if you're the Baltimore Ravens. So Pittsburgh, you got to attack the middle of the field. You got to run the ball well on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball, you got to stop the run. You got to get to Lamar Jackson, and you got to force turnovers. I don't love their wide receiving core. You also have to pay attention to Mark Andrews, newly signed on a 3-year, $39 million deal, and then Isaiah Likely as well. But when we come back, we'll hear from the crew at WTAJ on what else Pittsburgh is going to have to do to win this game against the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll get to that as soon as we come back.
Welcome inside another episode of Extra Points. I'm Andrew Clay, Ryan Risky here in studio as we get set to talk a little bit about Steelers and Ravens, our weekly black and gold edition. Some quick headlines, though, to start you out. TJ Watt back at practice today for the Steelers. Excuse me, for the Steelers. He showed up on the injury report kind of surprisingly yesterday, Ryan.
With that toe injury, didn't practice.
And Lamar Jackson also, he missed practice today for the Ravens. The Baltimore were very hopeful he would have a full week of practice. He did not practice.
I mean, I think that's concerning for the Ravens because of how crucial of a matchup this is going to end up being.
But how many weeks has he practiced?
That's true.
I don't know how important that really is. We also have Darius Slay cut by the Steelers early this week. Slay picked up on waivers by Buffalo, but Slay not reporting, saying he's not sure he actually wants to even play football anymore. Maybe a bit surprising there. Maybe just Buffalo wasn't where he wanted to end up.
Because we saw the report that the Eagles were interested in bringing him back, and it said that Slay was mutually interested in going back to Philly.
No surprise there. The Eagles got something out of him last year. The Eagles are injured at that position. They could probably use a body who already knows the system, but
it just wasn't a fit in Pittsburgh. 1 year, $10.5 million, and he was just not good. It's time to move on.
To be fair, I don't know if it's completely Darius Slay's fault. I mean, there's so many issues with that Steelers defense right now, and there's so many head scratchers at the moment.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not one guy's fault, or even it's a collective unit.
And here we are right before the Steelers and Ravens. For those who aren't watching this on the day we record, which is Thursday, here we are Thursday. This is an important game between these two teams coming up.
It kind of feels like, or it has the feeling of whoever wins this is really in the driver's seat for the division.
It absolutely
even though it's a one-game lead, I think it feels like this is the team that's really going to be in the driver's seat.
Well, I mean, and that makes good sense because they're going to have the one-game advantage. There's always a chance for the tiebreaker to work itself out because they're going to play once again. I would be curious to know how many times a team got swept by another team, but then ended up making the playoffs over them. Like it not even being part of the tie, like just outright getting in over them. I feel like that's super, super rare. So the tiebreak probably isn't going to come into play at all. But there's a lot of games right now this week in the NFL that feel like there's so much riding on it.
The Bears and the Packers.
The Bears and the Packers, Thursday Night Football, Cowboys, Lions. Both those teams need a win. Cowboys found a defense somewhere. I don't know where, but they found it. You know where they found it? The trade deadline.
Yep, Quinnen Williams.
The Cowboys defense has shown up now for the last couple games. The
That
Lions
offense is just in shambles right now. Amon-Ra St. Brown will not be playing.
Yeah.
Seems like whoever calls the plays between Dan Campbell and John Morton, it's been mostly mixed results and frustrating results.
Colts and Jags are important. Texans and Chiefs. The Chiefs just
need a win.
Flat out need a win to just keep their playoff hopes alive. It's squandering, and the Eagles' offense has yet to find its footing. Plays the Chargers on Monday night, so this is a really good week of NFL football with a lot on the line. And of course, again, this Steelers-Ravens game, we've said it for a number of weeks. It feels like a playoff game. It's win or go home at this point, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the cool things about the way the schedule lined up is that the two games between these two are coming at the end of the year. At practice yesterday, which was Wednesday, we talked to Pat Freiermuth beforehand, and he said that the game at the Ravens is one of his favorites every year because of the rivalry and the hostility in Baltimore. And again, it's a huge game. It's a huge game for the division.
Yeah. Oh, and what's important from the Ravens' perspective, they have a much more difficult schedule the rest of the way. They still have to play at Green Bay and play the Patriots, plus another matchup with the Bengals, who just whooped them last week.
In Baltimore.
This is probably, as much as it is a must-win for the Steelers, because at this point they all are, this is really probably more important for Baltimore to win this game, because I think you could sit here and make the argument 8-9 can still win this division, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And if 8-9 can win the division, when do we start talking about Cincinnati getting back in the fold?
Yeah, I mean, if they win out, then
they don't even have to win out to get to 8-9.
I think they do. I think they have.
No, that's to get to 9-8.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant 9-8. Yeah,
but 8-9 could win this division.
Yes, that's true. There's been in the past some divisions have had a team win it with a losing record.
And the Bengals still have wiggle room technically.
Yeah,
to get to 8-9. And the Bengals, of the three teams that we're talking about right now, I think have the easiest of schedule. They got a tough one against Buffalo. Pittsburgh might have the easiest schedule. They have a tough one against Buffalo, and then Baltimore, Miami, Arizona, Cleveland. These aren't world beater teams that they have to face.
Right. I mean, honestly, the two toughest games are probably the ones against the Ravens.
Yeah. Well, for the Steelers?
Yeah, for the Steelers.
For the Steelers, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Although the Dolphins are kind of playing well right now. Can we be honest about that?
Yeah, they are. It's just, that's also when you factor in, where it is, the time of the year.
The one thing, though, Miami is not a team that has to pass the ball. They are a running heavy team.
I think I saw somewhere, I forget where it was, but like the Tua Tagovailoa's record in games where it's below 46 degrees.
I don't blame him.
I believe he has 0 wins in games that are played below 46 degrees, or maybe it was 42. And I imagine it'll be in the 20s for that Monday night game.
I don't blame him.
100%. You're playing in Florida.
Well, he's from Hawaii, right?
Yep.
He went to college in Alabama, right? He got drafted by the Miami Dolphins, which notably,
there's a reason.
which notably have a Heat home field advantage usually.
Yep.
They notably, I don't know how many people know this. I think we've talked about it here on the show, but they notably put the road bench in the sun at Hard Rock Stadium for those afternoon games in the middle of September. You've got the road team literally baking under Miami's sun at 95 degrees and, whatever humidity. That's their home field advantage. We don't usually think about it in the summertime, but that's their home field advantage. They probably have the hottest stadium to play in.
Yep.
In the NFL, particularly there early in the season, because many of those other southern teams in hot areas play in domes: Houston, Dallas, Arizona.
Yeah, and also another thing with that too, like when it comes to December, when you've got the teams from up north that are coming and playing, in frigid temperatures when they're at home, and then they go to Miami, and like we've seen during the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady years, there are a lot of times that they'd go to Miami, later in the season and they would lose, even when the Dolphins weren't very good.
I think that was just, divisional games, and we've seen this, whether it's with the Steelers and the Browns, Steelers and the Bengals, Steelers and the Ravens. It is hard to sweep a division rival.
Yep.
It really is. I do imagine, though, I'm looking at this Bengals schedule. On December 21st, they're going to head to Miami to play a primetime game. I have to imagine they're going to get off that plane and they're going to be going, thank goodness, right? They would have just played at Buffalo, played at home against the Ravens, and they're going to be like, oh my God, it is nice to not be in frigid, freezing temperatures for once, because it's going to have been a minute.
Yeah, no, that is definitely true. I mean, even though Cincy's still a few games behind the Steelers and the Ravens, I mean, it still feels like they're right there with them.
It really does. And Joe Burrow's return seemed to give him a shot in the arm. And you just don't know how none of these teams have super difficult schedules left. Maybe Baltimore has the hardest with games against Green Bay and New England and potentially the Bengals being still in this mix and the Steelers. Like every team Baltimore plays the rest of the way is in the mix. The same can't be said for either of the other two teams. Both the Bengals and the Steelers have some teams on the outside, teams like Cleveland, teams like Arizona, Miami, if you want to call them on the outside. No, they're technically still alive and they're trending. This is a team that's playing much better right now. They're still currently on the outside looking in. So I guess I'm not going to sit here and just say that's a tough matchup, but it could be. You never know.
Oh, absolutely.
When teams heat up like this. But this is a super important game. And there's just nothing that can be said. But do you imagine, Ryan, like we can't sit here and talk about as if we're former players, but like we've been saying all year long, at least for like the last month, like important game. At some point, does that not just get old?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting point you bring up. It's just like you have to keep, especially when the division is this tight. You know, it felt like that Thursday night in Cincinnati was the day that if the Steelers won, they could have potentially locked up that division.
It really felt that way.
It really felt that way. And then they go to Cincy and they lose to the Joe Flacco Bengals. And it is, you know, he had only been with the Bengals for 10 days?
Yeah.
And if the Steelers had won that game, you know, I think that really would have knocked the Bengals out of the running for the division because, you know, right now you're saying, you know, if they went out, they could go 9-8 and they've got a schedule that's, you know, they could do it, you know, especially if the Joe Burrow return provides that extra jolt that they need.
We get 3 wild cards these days, right?
Yep.
So if we look at the playoffs right now,
that picture is probably really bundled up right now.
It really is. And if you start looking at the wild card, you know, the wild cards right now are the Chargers, Colts, Bills, and Texans. Texans are the first one out. And then the Steelers and the Chiefs. You've got the Chiefs. I mean, can we imagine a scenario where the Chiefs don't get in?
Yeah,
I mean, it feels more realistic because of how they're playing.
You know, and also like all 5, they have 5 wins, right? They're 5 and 6.
They're 6 and they're 6 and 6.
6 and 6. Okay, let's see. 5 of those wins are against teams with losing records. The only team they beat with a winning record is the Colts.
I'm looking at that right now. You're so right. Although the Ravens, they now are 500.
Yeah.
But they've got games against the Texans, the Chargers, the Broncos left.
Yeah, I mean, heads could potentially be flying in Kansas City if they miss, or it might be just one of those, all those deep playoff runs have taken their toll because, you know, they've had short off seasons.
We do know Patrick Mahomes is now officially going to win out and they're going to make it to the AFC Championship game.
Oh, yeah, that'd be the most Patrick Mahomes thing to do.
Okay, let's head to break. When we come back, Derek Forrest from DC News Now, he is going to join me to preview this matchup. We'll have him coming up when we return. You're watching Extra Points right here on your home for Black and Gold Nation. Welcome back. Derek Forrest from DC News Now joining us here as we break down this Steelers-Ravens matchup. Derek, I thought the Ravens had figured it out. I thought they were on the right path, but what happened last week against the Bengals, and were we all just fooled by a really weak schedule?
It could be a little bit of everything, but if I'm being honest, right, the Ravens, they started the year out 1-5. They go on this 5-game winning streak. Are we supposed to expect the Ravens to just run the table through the course of the year? That barely happens, right? So there's going to be a stumbling block somewhere. And I guess if there's going to be a better stumbling block, especially in the AFC North, no offense, it would be Joe Burrow, right?
Sure.
So he comes back and he was dominant. But there are some holes with the Ravens as well, right? I would say that their offensive line probably isn't as good as it's been in the past. Lamar Jackson is probably on the verge of being sacked more times than he has in his career. And we've seen some issues with the running game, even though Derrick Henry is still having a great year,
He really is.
right? He's got almost 1,000 yards again, but it's not anywhere near the 2,000 yards we saw him get, what, almost a year ago, a couple of years ago. And he had some fumbling issues to start the beginning of the year. So there's some holes. Their defense isn't as great as they traditionally are, but they've been able to figure it out over the last 6 weeks or so. And, again, Joe Burrow comes out on prime time and says, I'm going to make my return against the Ravens and we're going to pull out this W. So I'm not too concerned as the Ravens continue forward.
Is there confidence around that locker room right now? I mean, I know at the beginning of the year, it seemed like you could have just packed up and ended the season right then and there. It was so bad, but is that still a confident group right now?
Yeah, they're very much a confident group, but I also think that starts with their head coach John Harbaugh. I don't know how much you've heard him in press conferences or gotten a chance to hear him speak, but he typically has control of the locker room and has the backing of his players. And it's a confident group. Lamar's a confident guy. He's cool, calm, collected in the pocket, but even off the field too, right? So they believe in what they can do, and just like in the Steelers traditionally, they're just a traditionally good team. So there's really no reason for them to be negative, right? Especially over the last couple of years with Lamar. They continually find ways to get to the postseason, and going on that winning streak really helped their confidence as well.
Is Lamar Jackson healthy right now?
It's debatable. They're a little tight-nipped when it comes to that, right? They'll say that he's out for this or he's out for that. Maybe he gets a veteran off day here, but I feel like he's probably dealing with something every week.
I mean, everyone is in the NFL right now.
Yeah. But I think Lamar is fine, right? I don't think it's to the point where it affects his game, especially at least once he's on the field on Sundays. Does it affect his week of practice? Yeah, that's probably why they're resting him. But they're very tight-lipped on that. He's missed, even early on in the season, he's just missed some time, and John Harbaugh has just been kind of like, it's no big deal. And that's kind of the way they roll when it comes to injuries.
Defensively, you mentioned that, it's not as good as it's been, but it has certainly improved in particularly these games leading up to this Bengals loss. Is that just a matter of getting healthy, or have they kind of morphed and adapted schematically?
I think it has a lot to do with their health, especially in the defensive backfield, right? We've had Kyle Hamilton miss a game or two. We had Marlon Humphrey miss a game or two. And those are really your key guys in that back four when it comes to your defensive backs. Nate Wiggins is still figuring out his game as a youngster. And then they're led by Roquan Smith at the linebacker position, who's very knowledgeable. Kind of reminds me of a Bobby Wagner type with the Washington Commanders as well. But there's definitely some struggles probably with their defensive line. They've kind of been rotating guys in and out a little bit there. They don't really have a dominant guy on that defensive four that can really get after the quarterback and really force a lot of pressure. So they may be seeing some weaknesses there that have kind of affect the second level and the third level on this defense.
Steelers offensive line might help you learn a name or two this week. Well, Derek, I can't let you go without a quick prediction. What are your thoughts on how this game plays out?
So I think the Ravens get back into the win column. I mean, I know that there's been, and you would know better, but there's been some struggles with Aaron Rodgers over there the last couple of weeks, and the way that the way that offense has been running. But I think this is a good get right game for the Ravens to get back in front of the division. I know that you guys we're tied at 6-6, but I think the Ravens pull it off, and I'm going to say 8-point victory for the Ravens. We're not going to give you a score, though.
Okay.
I'll say they'll win by 8.
Fair enough. And this is no shot at Aaron Rodgers, but this Steelers offense does look like a team being led by a 42-year-old quarterback with a broken wrist. Like, that's what this team looks like right now. And that's quite reality. He's Derek Forrest for DC News Now. Derek, appreciate you joining us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 2822 Sports Night, sponsored by Hyundai. As you heard there, that was Andrew Clay talking with Derek Forrest about the Steelers-Ravens game and just how interesting this could be. You know, mentioned Lamar possibly not being fully healthy. They've been pretty tight-lipped about that. Aaron Rodgers was beaten, battered, and bloody. I'll give him this. Aaron Rodgers is gutting it out. He's showing me he's still got heart. But the offense just hasn't been as successful. The Ravens don't really have a pass rusher, so that could play to the Steelers' benefit a little bit. The Ravens aren't really healthy up front. I think they're still without Justin Madubuike. They've been rotating defensive linemen in and out, trying to generate pressure on the passer. Outside of Kyle Van Noy, who's probably their lone pass rusher there that could generate some consistent pressure on the outside. But yeah, this is a Ravens team that has struggled there. Roquan Smith is really the heartbeat of that defense. I think he compared him to Bobby Wagner over there in Washington, the veteran leader who tries to keep that group all together. But Roquan is also not great in coverage, and hopefully, and I say this every week, but Pittsburgh fails to do it every week, they can exploit the middle of the field and actually exploit Roquan Smith in coverage, whether that's on Kenneth Gainwell, whether that's on Jalen Warren, Pat Fryermuth, Darnell Washington, heck, even Jonnu Smith. Maybe he'll get something finally going since the Steelers have brought him in. But yeah, that should be something to watch out for as we get closer to this game on Sunday afternoon to determine the leader in the AFC North clubhouse. As the Bengals will also face a huge game for them, as every game is going to be huge for them down the stretches. They'll face off against the Buffalo Bills this week, and then they have the Ravens again in 2 weeks. So we will that will certainly be something to watch out for in the AFC North as we watch this. God, I feel bad. Whoever wins this division is going to be on upset alert come the first week of the wild card, because that is just how bad this division has been. And this is a very prideful division. You know, the Ravens are still very confident. Harbaugh is still similar to Tom, he has a firm belief in his players. There isn't a confidence. There really isn't a waver in him, at least not publicly. I'd imagine privately he's still sharing the same sentiment as well, that they're still in the thick of it. They can still win the division, and they could still make a playoff run. Mike Tomlin is probably also thinking that as well. But now moving on, it's time to talk about the other team in PA, the other team that is struggling, and another team that fell to the Chicago Bears last Friday for the Black Friday football game, as the Chicago Bears have gotten their way with both PA teams in 2 weeks. They beat the Steelers 31-28, and I think they beat the Eagles, I think it was 24-15, if I'm not mistaken, where both running backs had their way running all over this Eagles defense, and it doesn't get much better for this Eagles defense. Amari and Hampton could be returning for the Chargers with Kamani Vidal. Jalen Carter had procedures done on both shoulders, so he will be out. So the Eagles will be without their best interior pass rusher in Jalen Carter. You know, Jalen Phillips has done a great job there, but they're going to have to rely on Jordan Davis and Moro Ajomo for the most part on the interior of that defensive line as they look to really make an impact there. But they're going to be facing off against Justin Herbert's Chargers. Justin Herbert is dealing with an injury of his own, though, I believe to his hand or wrist area, but it is believed that he is going to gut it out. And he's always been a guy who's going to gut it out. He gutted it out last year in the Steelers game I went to, where he was dealing with an ankle injury. This is a guy, a very tough guy. He's going to be probably limited mobility-wise, so that will be something the Eagles won't have to deal with as much, but they're going to have to deal with his weapons on the outside. And those weapons include Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, who's been the steady Eddie in that veteran room, Oronde Gatson, who's been probably one of the more explosive tight ends that Justin Herbert's had in his tenure with the Chargers. But there's, the bigger focus right now is on the Philadelphia Eagles themselves. It's not really about the Chargers. No offense to them. The Chargers are a great ball club, probably going to be a team to watch out for come wild card playoff time, but it's about the Eagles. The Eagles are struggling. The offense in particular. Kevin Patullo's house got egged at the beginning of the week due to due to the poor performance there of the Eagles offense. There doesn't seem to be any consistency. The run game isn't going as well. They're dealing with some injury. They're beaten and battered and bruised up front with Mailata, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, all dealing with injuries this season. And the offensive line just hasn't been up to snuff. Their play hasn't been up to par as what we saw last year. Saquon Barkley hasn't been as good. Jalen Hurts hasn't been as good. A.J. Brown, there's been some drama with him this year. He had a great game last week, though. I think he had a couple TDs there as well. But yeah, this is a team that they're struggling, and there's a lot of tension. They're wondering, could it be Sirianni's last year? Because this is similar to 2023, where they seem to be faltering down the stretch. They can't find any continuity in their passing game or their run game. There's a lack of creativity, but I feel like there's always been a lack of creativity in their pass game. I feel like that's always been something, maybe not so much last year, but the year before. That's always been a theme. There's been a lack of creativity in the Eagles' pass game. And when the Eagles have had their most success is when they've hired outside coordinators. If you remember, Brian Johnson, there 2 years ago, did a terrible job as the Eagles coordinator. He was gone after 1 year. And now Kevin Patullo, another inside hire, is not having that offense at the level it should be. So there just are some consistent concerns, but Nick Sirianni maintains that he's got confidence, that he believes in his group, that he believes in Kevin Patullo. And as a head coach, that's probably what you have to say, because at this point in the season, you're probably too late to do anything. Realistically, what are you going to do? You're 5 weeks away from the end of the year. You're probably going to make the playoffs, in all honesty. Unfortunately, you're just going to have to ride this out. You're going to have to hope your offense finds lightning in a bottle. Now, it's unlikely that happens, but if you're the Eagles, that's probably what you're going to have to do. And the Eagles still have a pretty hard schedule down the stretch. You look at they have the Chargers this week. I think they have the Commanders twice, and the Commanders showed last week they were no pushover to the Denver Broncos. And with the way this Eagles offense is playing, they could probably hang around with them as well. But they have the Raiders the week after this week. So in 2 weeks, a week and a half, you have the Raiders. Okay, you can probably win that one. And then you have the Commanders. You have the Bills again in Buffalo, and then you have the Commanders at home to end the year. So your schedule loosens up a little bit over the after this game against the Chargers, because you face the Commanders and Raiders 3 out of the 4 games, and then the Bills. So you're probably still looking at least probably 11 wins. Say you lose to the Chargers and Bills, you go to 11-6 in the postseason. That's probably good enough to win your division, in all honesty. But there's just so much concern, so much turmoil, so much anger in this fan base right now with the way this offense is playing, and it's understandable, because you look at it on paper, they have the talent, they have their offense. They've got a lot of the same players they did last year. You have your same QB, you have the same running back, you have your same top 2 wide receivers. The offensive line, for the most part, is the same outside of, I think, Mekhi Becton. They bring in Tyler Steen. I know their offensive line may be dealing with some injury, maybe feeling some effects from that playoff run last year and their play style in what they did down the stretch. Maybe that is it, but the play calling doesn't seem there. The vibes seem to be off in the locker room. And that's one thing Nick Sirianni is supposed to be sort of the vibes guy. I feel like that's what his role is. He's sort of the guy that the crazy guy who's trying to keep the team morale high, keep players motivated, keep teams in check, keep this team glued together. And that's just not what they have been throughout this stretch run of the year. Now, in the earlier in the year, you could see that there were cracks in the foundation of this Eagles team. You saw that they were barely winning games. They were winning a lot of close games. Even that first week against Dallas, the offense wasn't great. The run game wasn't great. You thought, it's a one-off. They'll get it together. But the week after, they beat the Chiefs 20-17. Tough game going to Arrowhead. They beat the Rams off a blocked field goal. They barely beat the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers I think they played one good half, one bad half there. They lose to the Broncos. They lose to the Giants. They barely beat the Vikings. Then they dominate the Giants. You're like, okay, maybe they're finding their way a little bit. But then over the last 3 weeks, you look at it, or 4 weeks, you look at it, okay, they beat the Packers 10-7, where the Packers were decimated by injury. They beat the Lions 16-9 at home. They lost to the Cowboys. They blew a 21-0 lead in that game. They scored points in their first 3 drives and then nothing after. And then the Bears, they lost 24-15. And Caleb Williams in that offense, they get booed off the field at home. People probably were not happy. They bought tickets for that game. But the Bears, they had a spark in the third quarter. They had A.J. Brown on that 33-yard pass, but the Bears after that just ran all over this Eagles run defense. They got attacked up front. Kyle Monunga had 23 carries for 130 and a TD. DeAndre Swift at 18 carries, 125 and a TD. The Bears ran for 281 yards on 47 carries and 2 TDs, averaging 6 yards a carry on the dot. So it's going to be an interesting week. The Eagles desperately need a win. They do. This is a Chargers team that they can beat. They have the talent to beat, but this is a tough Chargers defense. Jesse Minter has this group playing as well as almost any group in the NFL. They can have at times a porous run defense, but their pass defense has been pretty solid. So they will have to rely a little bit more on the run game probably, because they're probably playing as well as any secondary in the NFL right now. But yeah, they need a win. They need to get this run game. And again, we've been saying all year, they need to get this run game going. They need Saquon Barkley to get going. Is this the game? Fine. No. I don't think at this point in the year, this is going to be a team that is going to just magically get the run game going. They're going to need to win low-scoring ball games. They're going to need this defense to keep this under 20, around 20 points. That's what they're going to need this defense to do. And their offense is going to have to put together 1, 2, or like 3, maybe 4 drives a game to get this team going. That is realistically what they're going to need to do. This is going to need to be on the defense, even without Jalen Carter, Jalen Phillips, Nakobe Dean, Zach Bond, Jordan Davis, the secondary with Quinyon Mitchell and who's ever starting opposite of him. Andrew Makuba, I think, is dealing with an injury. Reed Blankenship. This defense is going to need to keep it close. That's how they're going to have to win games. And I don't think it's feasible, especially going into playoff time. It's not going to be feasible for them to do that. But to win this game, it's going to have to be low scoring. I expect it to be somewhat low scoring, but the defense is going to have to keep them in this game. They're going to have to limit this Chargers run game with Amari and Hampton possibly coming back, Kamani Vidal. Justin Herbert's going to be banged up, so they're going to have to get after this Chargers offensive line. But that's what they're going to have to do to win. But that is going to be it for 28-22 Sports Night. I'm your host, Ricky Turner, and we'll see you next week where hopefully both of these teams win.